Welcome to Talking Pictures. My name is Christian Genzel. I'm a filmmaker and film journalist from Salzburg, Austria. Talking Pictures is a podcast series in which I talk to the people who made some of my favorite movies. Today's guest is Ted Nicolaou, best known for his many collaborations with producer Charles Band, including the popular Subspecies series. Ted started out as a sound recordist on Tobe Hooper's cult classic The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then went into editing, working on films like Roar, Trancers and Ghoulies. As a director, and oftentimes as a writer too, he made films like the offbeat horror comedy TERRORVISION, charming fantasy movies for children like DRAGONWORLD or LEAPIN LEPRECHAUNS, and, of course, the aforementioned Subspecies films, a series of vampire horror films which make perfect use of their impressive Romanian locations and manage to mix vampire lore, dramatic horror, and a dose of eroticism with just the right amount of tongue-in-cheek B-movie attitude. Our conversation, however, revolves around a lesser-known film which Ted directed, the St. Francisville Experiment, a found-footage horror film that came out shortly after the Blair Witch Project made its mark on the horror genre. The film tells the story of a group of filmmakers who set out to spend the night at a haunted Louisiana mansion, hoping to encounter the ghosts of the victims of Delphine LaLaurie, the real-life New Orleans socialite who brutally tortured slaves in the early 1800s. Ted was brought onto the film after some elements had already been shot, and he encountered a production which wasn't prepared as carefully as it should have been. In our interview, Ted relates how he came on board of the film, how he handled the initial shoot without much room for directorial influence, and how he and the production team then went about to restructure the film and add elements and reshoots, resulting in a horror film that wears the influence of Blair Witch on its sleeve, but manages to create a chilly, atmospheric mood and several effective scare scenes of its own. The interview was conducted in connection with our German language podcast Lichtspielplatz. So if you speak German, please visit lichtspielplatz.at and check out episode number 68, which features an in-depth discussion of the St. Francisville Experiment and many other found footage horror films. Also, make sure to listen to our interviews with found footage filmmakers Dean Alioto, Brian Leslie, Stefan Avalos, and Ron Bonk here on Talking Pictures. If you enjoy my conversation with Ted Nicolaou, please visit talkingpicturespodcast.com to check out more interviews and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. So without any further ado, here is director Ted Nicolaou. So yeah, Ted, I understand that the St. Francisville Experiment has a little bit of a complicated history, and that I think it started out as a real documentary and that you came in later during the process. So can you tell me a little bit about the history of the film and at which point you came on board?
Yeah, I was working at the time for Charles Band at a company called Full Moon, and Full Moon had sort of a shaky relationship with Kushner-Locke because when Charlie needed money, he would go to Kushner-Locke to finance some of his movies. And Charlie called me into his office one day and said, "Hey, I was going to go direct this Night in a Haunted House movie, but I can't do it." And I don't know why exactly. Maybe he discovered there were going to be some problems or something. But he asked me to go and oversee the shoot in this haunted house. So it sounded kind of interesting to me. But when I arrived in Louisiana for the kind of prep for the night of shooting, basically what I found was the cast who had already been assembled, the producer, Paul Salamoff, and Dana, I can't remember her last name, who was a production executive at Kushner-Locke, had already started shooting the kind of background interviews and the material that would kind of set up the ghost story in a way. And what they shot was actually very effective in kind of setting up the fear that would kind of infect the audience as they watched the movie. So I kind of walked into it and met everybody and went to the haunted house to kind of see what was prepared, because basically it was going to be a story that was 4 people in a haunted house shooting with their own video cameras with no interference from the production company, and to see kind of what happens. So the house was supposed to be rigged with certain kind of haunted house effects that could kind of be triggered in a way that would terrify the participants. But when I got there, basically it was basically not an abandoned, but a rented old plantation house. And we had a little trailer in back where we were going to monitor the goings on in the house. And when I said, okay, let's see all the ghost effects that we have prepared here, the only one that was really set up was the flying chair, which was very effective in its own right, but that was the only thing. And so really we had to scramble to figure out how are we going to like kind of generate some scares throughout a whole night of shooting. So all we could come up with were basically kind of like creating sounds and wiring doors so they would kind of creak open and a few things like that. So I'd sort of been tricked into participating in the movie that was not very well pre-produced. So basically I met all the actors who were going to be in the film, and Dana and Paul, and the sun went down and we started shooting. Basically the participants had cameras, flashlights, some food to eat, and a packet of instructions that would sort of kind of give them assignments so that they would have to go into different areas in the house. And then we kind of put them into the house and then sat in the trailer and just kind of listened to the audio to kind of understand what was going on.
It's an interesting way to direct. I mean, how much can you sort of influence what's happening in a setup like this?
Yeah, no, it was impossible. It was impossible. Basically, we had to kind of, I think the four actors had been kind of coached a little bit on, or maybe they had talked among themselves about what kind of roles they would play, where, Tim would be the kind of groovy filmmaker, kind of laughing everything off, and Paul would be like the kind of snarky guy, and Madison was kind of a psychic new ager, and Ryan Larson, she would be kind of she was sort of like a California girl / history major. So basically there wasn't much I could do except listen and pray that something interesting would occur. And like a lot of found footage films, I think it's mostly kind of made in the cutting room, and that's where most of the work occurred. So for the night of the shooting, we would kind of throw rocks at the walls outside the house and try to make bumps in the night and little things to scare them. But I think basically they scared themselves, just kind of pumping themselves up for going up the staircase, which was kind of spooky, and going into the attic, which was really the only room of the house that really had a vibe to it that was kind of terrifying. I mean, it was sort of so kind of thoughtlessly pre-produced that the house itself, the occupants had just kind of put all their bed sheets and towels and linens and stuff in cabinets, and so basically it was an occupied house, but just the people were off on vacation someplace. But it definitely had the kind of creaky old splendor of a Louisiana plantation house.
So the actors, it sounds like the actors knew that they were, I mean, that this is a fictitious story, but they were sort of reacting spontaneously to stuff that they didn't know what to expect, in a sense. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think they knew they were participating in a fictional film, but because of the interviews and the backstory of Madame LaLaurie is like so horrifying that it can't help but kind of infect your imagination when you're sitting in a dark room and that supposedly was connected to her. But I mean, we basically shot that night and spent like months kind of cutting it together and trying to make it interesting. And then Peter Locke of Kushner Locke, the company that was going to release the film, said, no, we have to reshoot, we have to shoot some more material. So then we ended up going back and shooting 2 or 3 more days, weeks apart, trying to add more kind of scares and more kind of interesting occurrences to the story.
Do you remember which scenes that you added during the reshoot?
Yeah, we added some scenes. Actually, some scenes that I don't know what version of the film you've seen, but the version that was left when I left the cutting room had a totally different ending than the version I see on Amazon now. And I don't know who cut it out or why, if it was too grotesque or if it was just too outlandish. I don't know exactly, but yeah, we shot, basically we kind of found a house in LA that had sort of some exteriors and some basement spaces and some interiors that would seem to match the interiors of the plantation house. And we shot a sequence, and it's been a while since I've seen the film. I don't know if it's even in the film anymore, where they sit down underneath a chandelier and the chandelier comes crashing down. Okay, so we shot that. We shot a scene where there's a cockroach in somebody's sandwich.
Yeah, in Ryan's sandwich.
Yeah. We shot everything having to do with the bedroom where Madison goes and sees the ghost reflected in the mirror, and everything that where Tim goes exploring by himself in the third act of the movie, and finds the hidden doorway in the closet and it goes down into the underground passageway. We shot, and I don't think it's in the film anymore, Ryan getting sucked down through a hole in the floor. That's not in the film, is it?
Yeah, it is.
It is, okay.
Yeah.
We shot Tim being dragged down the hallway. We shot, we kind of came in on the night of shooting to kind of, at the end of the night of shooting in the first week of production at the plantation house, we came in and shot some additional scenes of, camera rushing downstairs and things like that to kind of add to the kind of terror of the moment. But then we shot a whole ending where, we shot the discovery down a staircase of the medical kit. And we shot an ending in a torture chamber where I believe Paul is found chained up, or Ryan is found chained to a table, and a ghost is appearing, or a door is slamming. Was that in the version that you saw? It was. Yeah. So it's not in the American version, or did you see it? You saw it way back when it was first released?
I have this DVD. That's the European DVD.
Okay. Yeah.
And so that's the ending that's on it.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I'm glad to hear that, because that, I mean, it maybe goes a little over the top in terms of the sense of reality of the story, but it certainly kind of made for an effective horror film ending. So we basically kind of went in and shot each of those scenes and tried to find a way to make it seem that the camera is a participant in each of the scenes, and dropped it in a way that it could capture the action that's going on even after the actual actor has lost their camera. So it was kind of an interesting challenge in a way to imagine how to cover a scene when you're so limited in the point of view of the camera. So then it was a matter of much more editing to try to incorporate all these reshoots into the movie in a way that would seem kind of seamless and organic to the film.
I know you have a background as an editor, so I was wondering if that helped you in structuring the film and the proceedings and what you just described, the stuff that you needed to fill out the story in a sense.
Yeah, for me, I started out in film school to be a director, but I loved editing too. And when I first came to Los Angeles, I got work as an editor kind of immediately. And I feel like editing, between writing, directing, cinematography, and editing, they're all kind of equal in my mind in terms of the contribution to the film. And editing, I think, is a great way to begin for a director, because you kind of can understand how a scene can be stitched together in a way, and with a minimum amount of camera angles, really. And so, yeah, so editing has been like, has kind of been my foundation as a director, to know what you need and how to achieve it, and what angles are kind of the right angles to shoot each action, and to make it kind of cut together. So yeah, I mean, that and for this film, I sat with the editor kind of every day and all day, trying to because editing a documentary, and this is kind of like a documentary, it's like you're totally free, and there's no real screenplay to help you assemble what you're doing. So yeah, editing is really it's the key to making movies, I think.
So the film didn't have a screenplay. Did you have some sort of outline? Did you have some sort of, I don't know, sketches on what was going to happen?
No, it was a big surprise. It was going to be a surprise. That's the basic idea. I mean, they had, like I said, the actors had an information packet that kind of said, okay, now go up and go explore the second floor, and look in the closets, and check your e-meters for any ghost activity. So they had certain assignments that were like the structure of an improvisational film. But even when we did our reshoots and actually orchestrated each of the things, the cat jumping out of the cabinet was something that we did. Even those moments were, the gags were there, but the actors were left to kind of improvise. It wasn't really, nothing was ever scripted for that film, but it was like each of the events were kind of planned and executed like a film.
How much of the historical background of the story did you you said that they already shot the interviews about what happened at the actual house. Did you watch that and try to incorporate any of that, or was that just something that sort of set up the stage for basically the haunted house story?
In your European DVD, does it start with the interviews with the? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so basically I kind of read up on the background as I was flying to Louisiana. And I think Paul Salamoff had done his research and conducted those interviews. But once we had the interviews, then basically it's like documentary filmmaking. You go, okay, this soundbite really works, and let's connect it to this soundbite and put a photograph of the mansion in here to hide the edit in the audio. So it was really approached like a documentary.
Was there any other footage that was shot that you didn't use?
I mean, there was a ton of footage shot the night of the haunted house that we didn't use. And we tried to keep it, if you take a 12 hours or 10-hour kind of shoot that cameras are rolling continuously, 4 cameras, so you've got an immense amount of footage to kind of sort through. But automatically, you like 70% of it is just noodling around and nothing very interesting. So we kept focusing it down to as dramatic a moments as we could manufacture from the cast.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of interviews and outside stuff,
I think we used pretty much everything, you know. I mean,
mm-hmm.
maybe there were a few sound bites that we left behind, but yeah, I think because I think the effectiveness of the movie is really dependent upon you knowing that backstory of Madame LaLaurie. And I think the ghost hunter part of the interview, ghost hunter like demonstration, is a little bit lacking in credibility, let's say. But I mean, I'd like to believe in ghosts, but his explanation of things was not very good. And I think he felt, Troy, the ghost hunter, felt like he had been kind of deceived into participating in the movie, because he was approaching it like it was a real ghost hunting exhibition, and didn't realize that it was kind of a rigged feature film.
Yeah, I read a comment that the equipment that he explains at the beginning, that it was actual ghost hunting equipment.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and you know, they use them, but the way he explained it, I just watched the beginning just before we got on the Skype on Zoom here, and the way he explains that the magnetometer or whatever it is just so ludicrous and makes no sense at all. So I have to think that, you know, he's a little bit bogus, but I know he complained about the film after it was released.
What's interesting is that there's no music during the entire film. Was there a discussion on whether you should sort of try and spice it up a little bit with music, especially the ending?
No, I think we kind of felt like it needed to feel as raw and real as possible, and the addition of music would add a layer of artistry to it that it didn't really require. So, and the idea that, you know, when they first pull up to the house and you can hear the cicadas and the crickets, and it's just insanely noisy, like the South is, you know, that I think the natural sound of the movie kind of works in its favor. And when the chair goes flying in the attic, you know, it's such a raucous sound compared to the silence. We also shot we added a lot. When I look back on it, we also added the seance that they do with the Ouija board, where they communicate with Charles, and the shackles kind of tumbling out of the chimney. I mean, so it's almost like the skeleton of the movie was the night of shooting in the plantation house that yielded one really good moment, which is the flying chair. And then everything else is kind of manufactured in post-production.
I think what's great about the movie is really that there's not a lot that's happening. There's not a lot that's going on. And I think that realism that you talk about, I think if you accept that sort of realism, then it really becomes very effective, just because the little things become so creepy. I'm thinking of the scene with the doll that they find inside the wall. And I mean,
that's another thing we shot. Yeah.
Oh, okay. But yeah, I mean, this is not a big scene. This is not something where anything really happens to the characters. They just find a doll, and that's really creepy. And for a moment, you think that, oh, is this an actual child that was somehow buried there? Or yeah, it's creepy.
That's really good. Yeah. I mean, I was so close to it. And when you're that close to a movie, you don't really know anymore its effect on a fresh mind. And because we screened it in its first iteration, which was just the night at the plantation house, we screened it for an audience, and people were not all that enthusiastic about it. And so that's what led Kushner to Peter Locke to want to continue to add more and more and more elements to kind of pump up the movie. And yeah, so it's interesting if we succeeded in kind of making those sections that we added feel like they're an organic part of the original experience in the plantation house. That's cool.
How much were people aware when they watched the film for the first time that it's a fictitious story? I mean, it's sold as a documentary. There are no credits other than the credits for like the actual, like the characters who are in the story, but your name doesn't appear on the film, and well, it's presented like it's real.
It's funny, so you have like a very early version of it, which I think my name was not on it. At some point, somebody decided to put my name on it, and I was not happy about it because I didn't feel like it needed to have my name on it, and I felt like I hadn't planned the movie in a way that I felt like authorship over it, as a director. So I was a little upset, but then the kind of foreign residuals started coming in. I was like, whoa, okay. I'm okay with this. But yeah, I think when people saw it at first, you imagine that it's a real documentary because the performances they're not really acting. They're kind of the people that are participating are just being themselves, and the interview style at the beginning of the movie kind of has the form of a documentary. So I think people really, I mean, at a certain point, you probably go, when the cockroach pops out of the sandwich, I'm sure maybe people go, okay, this is fake, but I think if it gives you the creeps, then once you buy into the idea that this woman really existed and her torture of slaves was really horrific, it just infects your whole like emotional tone as you're watching the movie.
It's interesting because it's really the first found footage film that I've seen. I mean, other than obviously, when people define found footage, including mockumentaries that are not horror films, then I mean, there are different films. But this was the first horror found footage film that I've seen, and I saw it on TV late during the night. And I had heard of Blair Witch, but I hadn't seen it. And so I really wasn't sure if this was supposed to be a documentary or if it was, just a horror film. And I was very skeptical by watching it, but still trying to figure out the first half of the movie, trying to figure out, okay, is this for real or are they trying to set things up? And that was a really interesting viewing experience.
Did it actually affect you or give you the creeps as you were watching it?
Yeah, those scenes, like for example, with the doll. The scene with the cat, not so much, because that's such a horror trope that, there's a jumping cat somewhere inside the house. But I mean, it was set up in a way that I thought, okay, well, this could still be real, and the rest of it, yeah, I was still trying to figure out, okay, are they in an actual house where they think that actual ghosts are? So yeah, it was effective.
I think they were so, the four kids were so kind of pumped up with the idea that this is a haunted house, that even as they were skeptical entering into it, they kind of, that was in the back of their head. It's almost like when you're walking in the dark and you just imagine something behind you. I used to scare the hell out of myself just unlocking my front door at night, just imagining something back there. So I think it's the same thing. Your imagination kind of fills in the blanks.
Yeah, it's true, especially with ghost stories where it's more about imagining things and something that could be there, a presence that you feel. It's so intangible in a sense, not like a monster movie where you kind of know that, okay, you see a monster and you just know that it's a fantasy kind of story.
Yeah, I think, and in a ghost story, I think even the most tiny occurrences of the unreal kind of can give you chills, like just something moving just a tiny bit, So and I think the silence of the atmosphere kind of adds to that sensation too.
So the way I understand it is that the film was actually started before Blair Witch Project came out. Is that right?
I don't think so. I believe Blair Witch was the inspiration for doing a found footage film. I think that it seems to me that would be right, because Blair Witch kind of did it. I wasn't a huge fan of Blair Witch, but the performances I thought in Blair Witch were really effective. I thought it was like a little bit too much, shots of the ground and leaves and but it's undeniable how successful that film was. It just their marketing, everything about it just drew people to it, and drew people with the expectation that something scary was going to overtake them, and it really worked. And I think Charles Band and Kushner Locke kind of saw that and were trying for their own version of that.
I see.
And the cheap and the kind of new technology of cheap high-8 video cameras, just kind of opened up the world of found footage movies.
So I think it was, when it came out, it was very much, I mean, obviously Blair Witch had already come out when the St. Francisville Experiment was released. And so I think it was very much compared to Blair Witch at the time. And do you feel that was something that helped the film to get noticed, that there was another film that was sort of like Blair Witch, or that it was unfairly compared?
I think it was, Blair Witch was an honest attempt to create something scary. In a way, St. Francisville was a little bit more of a calculated attempt to capitalize on something that was successful. And I think, Kushner Locke and Charles Band don't really have or didn't at the time have the ability to actually release a movie theatrically and turn it into a big success. And they didn't have the kind of viral marketing team that Blair Witch had. And once Blair Witch kind of had already used that kind of a marketing approach, you could, it would be cynical to try to do it again, so soon. So I think Blair Witch had a lot of strikes against it in terms of reaching an audience. And Kushner Locke and Charles Band's, their main business was direct-to-video movies. And so it became a direct-to-video movies. And in a way, that makes it more accessible for like slumber party movie watching, and I have a feeling, and I'm not sure because I didn't really track the release of it that well, but I have a feeling that was kind of where St. Francisville got its audience, was kind of in kids turning their friends on to it and trying to scare each other, like telling ghost stories in the night.
I actually think it was more effective because I saw it on TV than it would have been if I had seen it in a movie theater.
Interesting.
Just because of the context, it was something, I think they showed it around midnight. That's something you catch on. I knew it was coming up. I saw, okay, it's a ghost story. I was interested in watching that. But like I said, I didn't know whether it was a documentary or not. And so the context of it was, okay, are they showing me a documentary? Are they showing me a feature film? Is this part of a presentation? I think there were 1 or 2 commercial breaks during the movie, just like you would have when you're watching a normal documentary on something. I think that context actually helped the film.
You know what? That's an interesting thought, that in a cinema, you're surrounded by 100 people, and your sense of isolation and possibility of a ghost creeping up on you from behind is kind of nil. Whereas when you're at home and it's midnight and you're a kid watching a movie, your imagination can really get the best of you. And for me, I grew up watching kind of the midnight horror-thons on TV, like Frankenstein and Dracula and all of the movies that were available in the 50s. And there is something kind of magical about being young and watching a movie in isolation like that. And I think it probably is more conducive to kind of scaring yourself.
Absolutely. And you sort of start playing the game in a sense, sort of imagining yourself in that situation. I think, okay, would I dare to spend the night in this home, even though I don't believe in ghosts, but like we said, our mind plays tricks on us. And would I dare to do that? Is that something that I would, so that
it's true. I want to believe in ghosts, and I'm like very skeptical, and so I disbelieve most accounts, but I want to believe, and so it's very easy for me to scare myself in that situation.
Actually, my landlady told me that there is a ghost in the house that I live in. This is a house here in Salzburg, in the old part of the town that goes back to the 15th century. So it has a lot of history. And she told me that several people have seen a ghost here in the house, but apparently only on the 4th floor. And I told her, well, next time she sees him, that she should ask him to come downstairs because I'd like to talk to
him. Wow. So he's like creeping up on the floors above you?
Apparently. I mean, I don't know what the story is. She said it is an old monk, but I don't know why he's haunting this house. I don't think it's a sort of tragedy connected to it, just some sort of, just because the house is old.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still waiting to see a flying saucer, and I'm still waiting to see a ghost. And I hope it'll happen someday,
Oh, that would be cool. There are a couple of moments in the St. Francisville Experiment where there's a little bit of humor, and I was wondering, was that added by the protagonists themselves, or was that added during the reshoots, like the exchange that they have when they find a dead bird, for example?
What? They find the dead bird?
Yeah, they have this.
Up in the attic. Yeah. All that is them. It's there because there was kind of a bit of a tension set up between Madison and her kind of new agey attitude of like, gotta bless the house, and Paul's kind of cynicism about all of that. And then just the need for them to say something when they encounter anything unusual kind of led to some really goofy exclamations. And that was, so it's really everything comes from them. The events that we added on at the end came from the filmmakers, but their reactions are all very honest.
I see, because that's a very cool moment when she asks, how badly is it dead?
Yes, I remember that. Yeah, that's all her, And I think it's just, I mean, maybe you just get in the moment that you're kind of agitated with fear, just dumb stuff comes out of your mouth sometimes, and I think that was definitely one of those moments.
There's also a moment where I don't know which of the characters, but they talk about why ghost hunters get frustrated when they go into haunted houses, and he says that, well, because nothing ever happens when they go into a haunted house.
Yeah, that's all. I mean, there were 4 people that really had to fill an evening with talk and exploration, and they were cast pretty well for that, because they all kind of added a unique kind of point of view, to the occurrences.
Did you know anything about the casting process of how they were selected?
No, I do not know anything about the cast. If you wanted to talk to Paul Salamoff, you could probably find him, because that, I think it must have been his idea that he brought to Kushner-Locke or to Charles Band, and basically I got brought in, and Dana Scanlon was like the Kushner-Locke executive. So I kind of got brought into a situation that was, I think I was just there to make sure technically that we would get something usable. And so I kind of instructed the cast on, how to how to shoot what they were, how to cover kind of what they were going through. But yeah, the cast was already established, and I just kind of had to work with them.
Mm-hmm. And there is one shot which I wanted to ask you if that was yours, but I suspect it was just created by one of the actors. That's one of the girls. I don't remember which one. And she shines the flashlight sort of at herself, and she casts this huge shadow at the ceiling in this room. And it's a really beautiful image, and it sort of reminded me of all the Nosferatu images in the Subspecies series, obviously. So
yeah, that was probably something that we manufactured like after, in the reshoots, because once we got involved with the reshoots, then it was a much more kind of thought out process in terms of how to cover it, how to light it, how to, you've got one flashlight in one hand, a camera in the other hand. When you put down the camera, how does that camera see what we want you to see? So the lighting effects and the camera work was much more kind of controlled in those reshoots.
Mm-hmm. I imagine it's pretty tough to create that kind of look, because it's supposed to look amateurish in a way, but you still wanted to, to tell the story and to fulfill a certain function, and still, kind of look like a cool movie, just on its own terms, right?
Yeah, because it's really, the camera becomes the eye of the audience as they're traveling through space, and the kind of shakiness of the camera kind of influences your own nervous system. So we really put a lot of thought into, okay, how do we make this seem to be a subjective camera held by this actor, but give it to me, so when it drops, I can make it kind of tumble over upside down or however it needs to be, and capture you as you fall back onto the ground. So it was kind of a choreography between camera, actor, and me there, kind of also trying to make sure that it looked completely accidental, but was completely planned,
Mm-hmm. Did you get another cinematographer involved for the reshoots?
No, basically we had the cameras in hand, and that would be the starting point, the actor with camera in hand, and then kind of like, okay, now give me the camera and I'll kind of place it where it needs to be, or let me walk alongside you with the camera so you're free to open the door. It was, but with those, the movie had to be kind of lit by flashlight, lit by kind of available light, and camera in hand. So there was really no need to bring in a DP who could light things nicely or any of that.
Now, you said that you didn't follow the release of the film too closely. How much did you, I don't know, did you read the reviews? Did you sort of gauge the first reactions by audiences?
We screened it a few times, so I did see kind of the audience reactions. I have learned to be real careful about reading reviews of your work, because just one bad review can like upset you for days and days, So I try, and I felt with St. Francisville, I felt responsible up to a certain point, but not like I do for the Subspecies films or for my film TerrorVision, anything that I've really poured my soul into over a period of months. This was kind of like accidentally dropped into a middle of a production, did the best I could with what we had to shoot, and then brought as much filmmaking technique as I could to the reshoots. But because the idea wasn't mine to begin with, I didn't feel, like I said, like any kind of authorial kind of responsibility for it. But I'm always curious, so I would read the reviews and read the bad reviews and read the good reviews. And I got the sense that it was effective with people of a certain age, that teenagers would get together at slumber parties and turn their friends onto it. And that's kind of the story of my film TerrorVision too, was like a comedy horror movie, but it got awful reviews when it first came out and was just savaged everywhere. And yet it appeals to a certain kind of person, a certain oddball kind of person. And there's enough of those oddball kind of people around that they would turn their friends onto it. And over a number of years, that film has gained an incredible reputation and an incredible audience of young, hip people, of today, So I'm kind of as heartbroken as I was when the movie first came out. I'm kind of satisfied now that it was enough outside of its time when it was made, and was so different from any movie that had been made at the time that people didn't understand how to deal with it. And yet it finds an audience, and Subspecies, the same thing. And I think St. Francisville, I don't know what the longevity of St. Francisville is, if people are still turning their friends onto it, or if it's been kind of like washed under by the ongoing tide of more films and more films, and didn't quite stand out enough. So yeah, I mean, I followed it, but I didn't agonize over it like I might have,
Yeah, I think these days it's sort of seen as one of many found footage films, I guess. Critics are always tough on horror movies. And I mean, horror movies have become more mainstream over the years, but still, it's still something that you find very few horror movies where you actually read a lot of good reviews and people say, well, this is a very enjoyable and this is worth your time and what have you. And I mean, back in the old millennium, so to speak, I mean, it was sort of like almost, I think, like a badge of honor when you got really terrible reviews from notable critics. Then, I mean, me as a horror fan, I would sometimes really seek out the films that really got the worst reviews by just because I knew, okay, they were offering something different, like you said about TerrorVision. I mean, there's something in there that's not part of that mainstream, that's somehow against the norm in a sense. So I discovered a lot of great films just by going through the bad reviews.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's actually a good way to do it, because a lot of the horror movies of today that gain a lot of critical acclaim seem weak to me compared to some of the great horror movies that have been made. So yeah, maybe that's the trick. I'll take you up on that advice, and give it a try. Yeah, because really horror movies are supposed to be kind of like the renegade movies, and they shouldn't really appeal to mainstream critics. There should be a whole set of horror film critics, and I guess they're just fans, horror film fans, that kind of spread the word.
Yeah, and I think it helps a horror film when it's not part of that mainstream, because horror films are at their most effective when you don't know what you're going to expect, when you don't know how far the filmmaker is going to go, when you think that, okay, there might be something in there that could be really disturbing or that might really put off a lot of people. And sort of that can be the appeal. That's something that, maybe they're going at, maybe they're arriving at something else in a sense.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And I guess that's the, I mean, Charles Band has been making movies for, since the 70s, and all of his movies, none of them are super successful. They're mostly home video releases, but he's got a legion of fans around the world because of that. They're like movies that are kind of made specifically for fans, not for anybody else.
Yeah, it's true. And you kind of know that, okay, this is going to be fun and this is going to be, yeah, just
It's going
different
to be
in a sense.
cheap and a little bit shabby, but
Yeah.
it'll sort of have the homemade quality, you know.
Mm,
I think it may be in a way, St. Francisville, if it's effective in scaring young people as they're watching it, that's really good. I think the reason behind its making was a little bit too commercial and not
mm,
didn't come from the heart like a good movie should come from your heart. And so if it didn't gain or didn't stand the test of time quite as well as like
mm,
something like Blair Witch, it probably comes from that, from the motivation for making the movie in the first place, and the fact that not enough resources were put into the filmmaker's hands to actually make it
mm,
as effective as it should have been. I mean, if they had tricked out that house with a number of haunted house effects, you could have scared the hell out of those kids in there and maybe gotten something really interesting.
mm. Have you ever thought about making another found footage film?
You know what? There was a period right after Blair Witch and after St. Francisville that I pitched some other found footage films
Mm,
to Kushner Locke, and none of them really took off. And yeah, I would consider it because it's an interesting exercise in technical filmmaking to try to make it seem immediate as a found footage film needs to be. On the other hand, I'm more interested in telling stories with cameras and
mm,
with production designers and a cinematographer and beautiful lighting and interesting locations. That interests me more as a filmmaker. So I
mm,
kind of pursue those kind of movies more vigorously.
I
And
see.
when I imagine a movie to write, I think more in terms of telling a real story than trying to do a
Mm,
found footage film. I mean,
mm,
that film Rec, REC,
mm-hmm.
the Spanish film I think is an amazing found footage film. You know, there's like some really great ones.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
an interesting genre. I mean, it's just a completely different genre, I think, in terms of the storytelling, and the mood is so important, and the feeling of being there is somehow more important than an actual construction of a story, because the story is usually okay, some people go to a certain place to film to find out something, and well, this is what happened.
yeah, I think the actual sense of reality that you get from the whole the kind of documentary form blended with the found footage, uh, like automatically gives you more, uh, adds tension to the story.
Mm,
And I actually outlined another found footage film just in the last 5 years or so that I think would have been really fun to do, but again, never
mm,
really got it off the ground. But I think the idea that found footage films is a genre that will continue to be a part of cinema
mm.
is interesting, and it certainly kind of is a great way to tell stories in a different way, in a way that forces the filmmaker to kind of come up with new solutions.
Mhm. It's also interesting how it sort of reflects our everyday life. I mean, during the first wave of found footage films, I mean, yes, some people had camcorders and were able to record stuff. But nowadays, when everybody has a camera on their iPhone and everybody films just everyday situations all the time, and that's sort of when you see a found footage film nowadays, it's sort of very natural. You don't have to ask, okay, why are they filming this? Because yeah, they're filming all the time. It's we all have the technology in our pockets. And
Yeah. And I wonder why we haven't seen more found footage films for that very reason, why,
mm,
or maybe I'm missing them or something, or maybe the image of an iPhone is like too pristine and perfect for
mm,
the sense of grainy reality that found footage films have. I mean, like I worked on Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the very first film, and the sense of reality from the 16 millimeter and from the graininess and from the kind of just tawdry locations made that movie very effective. And I think in a way, the same thing with Blair Witch, the kind of simplicity of the visual design of it made it more effective. And St. Francisville, the kind of the way that the cameras don't reveal everything, there's still darkness and out of focus and all of that you can't really achieve so easily with an iPhone camera. And any iPhone camera found footage film is going to look more like a feature film just because the camera is so good, you know.
That's an interesting thought. Yeah, I think, like you said, the grittiness of the image really plays into that mood. And I mean, also most found footage films are also shakier than people would usually handle a camera in a sense. I mean,
exactly. Yeah, because the whole idea needs to be these amateurs actually just captured something extraordinary, you know.
And sort of by accident, in a sense.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, of course, is one of the great examples of what I was talking about, with a film where you don't know how far it's going to go, with a film where you don't know what to expect. So
yeah, that film took everybody by surprise, including us who worked on it. You know, it was turned out so much better than we imagined it was going to.
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing milestone.
Yeah, it definitely is. Yeah.
So you were off to a great start with starting off on Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
I was very lucky in my career to have had that experience, and an experience on a movie called Roar, which do you know that film? The Tippi Hedren and Noel Marshall.
Yeah, with Jan de Bont as a
yeah. So yeah, I've had some crazy experiences in making movies.
Yeah, I mean, you have a lot of cult movies on your CV. I mean, films like Trancers and Ghoulies, and of course the Subspecies series. I mean, we could do an entire podcast on the Subspecies series. Obviously,
that's for sure, man. That's for sure. Yeah. We shot all those in Romania, you know, in the 90s, and now Romania is too expensive and too overrun by Hollywood studio films. So we had to shoot the latest Subspecies in Serbia.
Okay.
So it was like, had a totally different kind of, I mean, it's the same vibe of Subspecies, but a totally different kind of feeling and crew and acting and everything. It was a really interesting experience.
I'm very much looking forward to seeing it. I mean, just the sense of location of the original Subspecies films, I think, is amazing. The castle that you found, and just in the second film, the opera house in Bucharest.
Yeah, we were.
I mean, that is so amazing.
Lucky. Yeah, the Romania back in the 90s, before Hollywood kind of came in and changed the economics. I mean, we filmed in monasteries and churches, and I think maybe we ruined shooting in churches, because after that the Orthodox Church said no more filming in our churches. You know? But we got away with it. We could go down into crypts, and I mean, it was anything was possible back in those days. Now it's like more expensive and not so possible. Serbia had a lot of the same, didn't have the castles quite like the spectacular castles of Romania, but it had unique kind of places that we were able to utilize for the film, and an incredible crew, an incredible director of photography. So yeah, I'm really excited to see it with an audience.
Are you going to come to Europe for a couple of screenings?
I would love to, if anybody ever invited me. Yeah, I would love to. Yeah. I'm hoping so, because I think there is an audience of people that appreciate the Subspecies films in Europe as well. I mean, we had Miroslav Lakobria, you know, the makeup effects artist of Serbia, who did a Serbian film.
Oh, okay.
worked on the film with us. And when I first met him, he said, "Oh, I'm so happy to be here because I was a big fan of Subspecies when I was a kid." So I'm like, wow, okay, that's like, I mean, I don't know if it was bootleg copies that kind of made it all over Europe, or if it was Sky TV, or how people managed to see the films.
Yeah, a little bit of both, I think.
Uh-huh.
Bootleg tapes, of course, the video stores. Some of those versions were cut, obviously, but still, we're trying to see everything, I guess. And then you sort of, at that time, you always had those late night showings on TV, on some of the channels where they had, all the horror films or all the independent and the B movies and that sort of thing. So that was a great way to discover a lot of films.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I'm all for like bootlegging if that's the only way that people can see the movies that I've done. It's like, I'm just happy that people are able to see the films, because sometimes some of them are not available, in any other way.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen quite a few of your movies, but some of them are just very tough to find. Some of them have been released on VHS back in the 90s, and there's just no version of it anymore.
Yeah, now Charlie Band he has his own streaming service, Full Moon Features or Full Moon, that's part of Amazon Prime. So he's trying to gather up a lot of the movies that he made back in the day and put them up on his streaming service. But some of them he can find the negative and create 4K versions, and some of them are just exist on VHS and beta tape, and that's about it.
The second Leprechaun movie that you did, I think that, for example, there's a VHS release, and that's about it.
Yeah, I'm sad about that, because those kids movies that I got to direct I thought were really fun, and were kind of, they're low budget and a little bit shabby in places, but they're also really the Leprechaun movies. The casts were fantastic, I thought. And DRAGONWORLD, my film DRAGONWORLD, finally has a 4K release, and looks beautiful,
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's on Amazon Prime.
I have the old DVD.
Sweet, man.
Yeah, I got this one, and this is the first Leprechaun movie.
Wow, cool. That's great, man. Yeah.
The transfer on both of them isn't great. But hey, it's a way to see them. So
yeah, that's the thing. Like DRAGONWORLD in the 4K version is widescreen, and it really, makes a big difference to the film.
Okay, well, hopefully this version will reach Europe too, because I think David Allen's work on the dragon is just so amazing. I mean, that makes the entire movie. I think it's really really fun to watch.
He was really, and his shop created the big dragon head too. Not only the stop motion effects, but the giant head. And that movie was unique in the Charlie Band world, because we really had the budget to kind of do what we wanted to do, until we ran out of money, and then they sent us to Romania to finish it. We shot like weeks in the UK, and then the weather was so terrible that we got behind schedule, so they sent us to Romania to finish it.
Okay. Well, those are the adventures of a independent filmmaker, I guess. There's
Exactly.
Always something happening, and just sort of have to deal with it.
Yeah, you got to adapt to the circumstances, for sure.